The garage and the tool shed are really on a tear lately. It's weird. I never think that the hammers and saws did a great job building this house, or that the socket wrench did a great job fixing my car, or that this camera is doing a great job making this video right now. In those contexts, I usually credit the construction worker or the mechanic, or in this case, the guy making the video for those end products. These are all just tools, and while they may be effective to get the job done, they are totally dependent on the intent and the skill and the action of a user manipulating them. All of these results took a human user to achieve. It's not like Toy Story, where all the garage characters suddenly became active during human absence and fixed all this stuff for me. And it's a good thing these tools aren't animated, because if they actually had consciousness, they would see how unfair their treatment is. They get none of the credit for their work done well, and all of the blame for their misuse. Remember, the SUV was the notorious perpetrator of a mass plowing in November, and Alec Baldwin didn't shoot anybody. The gun just went off, and he happened to be holding it at the time, just trying to comfort it through the high pressure of performing on camera, which explains why Alec isn't charged and probably won't be. But what about the Waukesha case? If it was the SUV that plowed through the crowd, why isn't the car on trial? Not just for the murders, but for the kidnapping of this man. Why isn't he set to testify against that murderous Ford Escape? And if guns simply go off while people hold them through no fault of their own, why was this kid ever even on trial? It was not only wrong, it was reckless and unnecessary. After all, that gun tried to shoot even more people in the courtroom. It's a scourge that won't stop tools spontaneously animating and co-opting human hosts to carry out their inherent evil. And it struck again on Friday night in New York City during a lethal police confrontation at a Harlem apartment. As New York Governor Kathy Hochul described in Morning the next day, a shot from an illegal gun took the life of an NYPD officer. But don't worry, we're going to do everything we can to stop these illegal immigrant guns from crossing our borders and breaking our laws. Notably, no mention in that tweet or in its corresponding video, which we'll get to, or any of her public statements on this incident that actually describes what happened, that actually describes who did this and what the circumstances of the crime were. Because yes, the gun at the center of Hochul's response did in fact have an owner and an operator. His name was LaShawn McNeil, a man with a significant criminal record who had just returned to New York City from Baltimore through the assistance of his mother, who was worried about his mental health. She says he was entrenched in anti-government conspiracy theories and believed he was God. The mother and son had reportedly often been at odds, and there was some sort of dispute between them that caused mom to call 911 on her son on Friday night. 3 officers responded to that call and arrived at the apartment. They spoke with the mother first, and then 2 of the officers moved toward the back of the apartment down a narrow hallway. And that's when McNeil swung the door open and fired a Glock, striking both officers, and reportedly kept firing as they were down on the floor. A complete execution caught on body cam, NYPD sources say. McNeil then tried to flee, and that 3rd officer shot him, hitting him in the head and the arm. He initially survived and underwent surgery, but died on Monday. As far as the officers, rookie cop Jason Rivera died on the scene. He was just 22 years old and married in October. 27-year-old Wilbert Mora is hospitalized and fighting for his life after being shot in the head and undergoing 2 surgeries. Actually, scratch that. Since I recorded this video, Wilbert Mora has now been taken off life support and also died. McNeil has now killed both of them. The cop who shot McNeil is apparently fine, at least physically. And while Kathy Hochul focuses on the illegal gun in the story, she never addresses the illegal operator. This guy had a serious criminal past. McNeil was a felon. In fact, he was out on probation at the time of the attack, stemming from a 2003 felony narcotics conviction in New York City. In 1998, he was arrested in South Carolina for unlawful weapons possession, though that charge was later dismissed. He assaulted a police officer in Philadelphia in 2002. He found additional felony and misdemeanor drug charges there as well. Kathy Hochul doesn't tell you that the primary thing that made that gun illegal was the guy using it. on account of his criminal past. Instead, she posts this video of her press conference arguing, gosh darn it, just one more law would have stopped this illegal gun of his.
It's a resounding call to action. We have to do more to fight the scourge of illegal guns on our streets, and we need Washington teaming up with us, teaming up with locals to get it done. These guns, despite our tough laws here in the state of New York, and we're proud of them, they're coming in from other states. And I have pledged the resources of the New York State Police to become embedded with NYPD and others to help them. And we have to do whatever we can to protect our neighborhoods.
Whatever we can do to protect our neighborhoods. Except get serious about the criminals ravaging our neighborhoods, because they get reduced sentences and no cash bail and a defunded police force that doesn't have the manpower to even arrest them in the first place and put them through these minor inconveniences anyway. Because New York has done their part of writing an infinite list of laws that aren't even enforced. It's Washington who needs to federalize their nonsense on everybody else. Newly inaugurated Mayor Eric Adams said much the same. No commentary on the actual criminal in the tweet thread, just to note that there are no gun manufacturers in New York City, so how are the guns still finding their way into the hands of killers? New York has done our part. We need Washington to act now to stop the flow of weapons into our cities. As though DC hasn't already done that decades ago, as though there was nothing federally illegal about what this guy did. We'll get to that in a moment, but first, let's consider all the many ways in which this guy broke state laws. And I think I have most of them, but given the volume of gun laws in the relevant states, I'm sure I don't even have them all. First of all, McNeil stole the gun, or at least got it from somebody who stole it. It was stolen in Baltimore a few years ago. In addition to that general property crime, that means the gun was not properly transferred through a licensed dealer when it switched hands, as Maryland law requires. If it crossed state lines instead, that's a violation of federal transfer laws. As a felon, McNeil was not licensed for handgun possession in Maryland, as Maryland law requires, nor did he register that handgun in Maryland, as Maryland law requires, nor did he wait the necessary 7 days to receive the gun, as Maryland law requires. And even if he only had it in New York, he was not properly licensed for handgun possession in New York, nor did he register the gun, as New York law requires. You'll notice in the photos this Glock he used had a drum mag, and magazines of such high capacity are illegal in Maryland, at least they can't be purchased there, and they're illegal to possess in any circumstances in New York. And maybe Hochul or Adams might say, right, that's the point. Our laws prevent such things. It's the relaxed gun laws elsewhere that are the problem that made this happen. But this guy was a felon. Under federal law, he is a prohibited person. He can't have any gun anywhere in the United States. High capacity or low capacity, assault or common sense. He can't have a gun in the wild west of Wyoming, just the same as he can't have a gun in Times Square. Not any gun anywhere. Under decades-old federal law, this guy cannot be armed, and yet he was. And we're supposed to believe that if we just made that double illegal, or if we passed one more law to ban that specific shape of plastic and metal, somehow this all would have been stopped. One, as though it's possible to strictly control all the different shapes of metal and plastic in the world, but two, as though it would make any difference even if you could, as though this guy couldn't have ambushed these cops just as effectively using common sense 10-round Glock mags instead. In fact, despite this mountain of common sense gun laws, the uncommon insanity of this criminal still happened with lethal consequences. So is it actually that we're always just one common sense law short of finally achieving the common sense, or is it that we're constantly rejecting common sense where it belongs? Do we need common sense gun control, or might we try common sense criminal control instead? If we've seen enough to try the latter, that means two things. Number one, it means a justice system that punishes and deters crime, not one that excuses it or justifies it or explains it away. But number two, it recognizes that criminal threats are inherent to humanity, that people are people and tools are tools. And while there are way more guys who will build you a house with a hammer, there are always a few who will kill you with one too. And given that unchangeable reality, it is much more effective to prepare ourselves to defend against that evil than it is to pretend we can ban the technology that is the chunk of metal on the end of a wood stick. We know how to make those. There is no erasing that knowledge, just like there's no erasing the human constant that is the evil heart. In other words, let's stop trying to disarm the ability of good people to defend themselves from these threats and start confronting the threats instead. If we actually believe that common sense is common, that most people are good and sensible and reasonable, well, then there's no problem with having these people armed to defend themselves and their families and their neighborhoods. In fact, it's the opposite. It's a solution. That's good people protecting each other. There is no magazine with a capacity high enough for the criminal to overcome 50 vigilant common sense barrels pointed at him before he ever even thinks about trying to use it. So we have two options. We can deny that criminals exist and make ourselves helpless and surrender to them when they appear because they do, in fact, exist, or we can be prepared and ready to meet that inevitable threat instead. We can bet on Kathy Hochul defying all of humanity's history and miraculously erasing evil, or we can recognize that when evil chooses us for a target, Kathy Hochul is going to be off laughing in some mansion somewhere, creatively thinking about how to use your body as a prop to give herself more power. So it's probably best to prepare ourselves and not rely on her. But then again, maybe she can save you. She does claim divine ordination.
And I wear my vaccinated necklace all the time to say, I'm vaccinated. All of you. Yes, I know you're vaccinated. You're the smart ones, but you know there's people out there who aren't listening to God and what God wants. I need you to be my apostles. I need you to go out and talk about it and say, we owe this to each other. We love each other.
Turn some water into wine, and then maybe I'll believe that you can conquer all the world's evil. Until then, I'm just going to pick up a Glock drum myself. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Gab. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.